point of this video is to sort of talk a little bit about just the basics, very, very basics of what's happening with AI in the music industry for folks that haven't been paying attention, of which there are a lot of people that aren't paying any attention to this at all. And then talk a little bit to musicians and talk a little bit to maybe AI creators. This is a fascinating subject I've been following for, as I look back, I realize I've been following this for several years, but my interest has re-peaked recently a couple of years ago with Suno coming out and becoming a thing. And, you know, I'm always interested to know what's happening with technology in the music industry. I'm somebody that really likes technology. I've always used it in its various forms. So, you know, as a kid, I used early multi-track tape recorders. And as soon as, well, not as soon as digital came out, but when digital came out, I was a little slow on that because the early digital systems were not very good. But I eventually, after trying using computers, this is in the 90s, maybe, I don't know, somewhere in there, about the 90s, trying to use computers to replace what I was currently using, I gave up on it, and I went to a different digital system, you know, ADATs, and then eventually got into using computers and DAWs, of course, early aughts, somewhere in there. But the point is, I like technology, been using technology for a long time, and this is just another technology. As I was looking at the history a little bit, artificial intelligence has been used in the music industry in various forms for nearly 70 years, with its initial experiments dating back to the 1950s. So the most famous is this AI-generated piece of music in 1956. When a computer at the University of Illinois was programmed by professors to create this Iliac suite. And so they used predefined set of algorithms provided by human programmers, and it created a piece of music. And then EMI they figured out a way to use sort of AI to analyze a composer's existing score and generate new compositions in their style. So this is in the 90s, fooling many listeners into believing they were human-made works. And let's see, next we've got in the 2000s, there's talk about machine learning with neural networks, and then AI as an assistant. The first sort of public-facing version was something that some of you may be aware of, called JukeDeck, which was launched in 2015, which allowed users to generate royalty-free music for videos demonstrating AI's growing practical use in content creation. So it goes on from there, but the point is, this is a technology that's been around for a while, and also a couple other things that we've been using AI for all of us have been using AI for a long time without realizing it. In some of these apps like Shazam, that find music based on listening to it. You know, that's we probably all have some version of that on our phone. There's a few of them out there. That's AI technology. I think of AI as kind of just a glorified search engine, you know, and that's essentially what it is. But here's kind of the main difference. It has something that they're referring to as continuous machine learning, which allows AI engines to update their algorithms and refine results dynamically in response to changing web content and user behavior. AI algorithms use AI to tailor research based on user behavior and preferences. These engines dynamically learn and improve their algorithms to respond more intelligently over time, a capability traditional search engines lack. A good example of that for me that I was thinking about as I read this was that I've been using ChatGPT for a while, and I have used it to think through some different audio routing, gain structure, things like this. and it's okay for that. It's not bad. It kind of gets you in the ballpark of some of these things. But now, when I ask it certain things, it might make a reference to the software might make a reference to my interface because I've told it the specifications of my interface, or it might make a reference to the specifications of my computer, things like that. So it's remembering those, and it might say, well, since your computer is a little bit older, you might want to do this, this, and this, you know, or since you have this interface, you have the ability to do this and this and this. So it's, it's about 70% useful and accurate. There's a good solid 30+% where it's just wrong. And sometimes, and it has, ChatGPT in particular has sent me down paths that, I mean, it's just been wrong, and then eventually once I figure out what's going on, I'll tell it and I'll correct it and say, this is actually, it just happened the other day. Where it just said 2 or 3 things that are wrong. And I said, nope, that's not right because blah, blah, blah. And it said it again. I was like, nope, that's not right because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. So it's, but in that sense of it remembering what you did before and adding to it, this is something that this is the machine learning, okay, that they're referring to. So I'm trying to take a little bit of the mystery out of some of this because I feel like, I've just been thinking of it as a glorified search engine. It's a little bit more than that, but it's still just software that people are programming. And I feel like the CEOs from a lot of these companies have really overblown, in the media, of course, it's a great story, have overblown this idea that AI is going to take over the world and that it's going to start thinking for itself and whatever, because it makes a good article. And the CEOs, of course, are all doing it because it makes them money, because they all have stock in the company, and their job is to make their company look super valuable. Of course, that's what they do for a living. They make their company look impressive. That's a CEO's job. So I'm very cautious about what I sort of believe when it comes to, any of these guys that run these companies, and when they do these interviews with the godfather of AI and all these people, just a quick Google search and see how much, see how heavily invested they are in AI. Anybody that's doing an interview that's saying it's about to take over the world and blah, 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 or whatever they're saying, yeah, quick Google search on them to see how heavily invested in AI they are. And they're all very heavily invested, monetarily invested is what I mean. They're making money off of AI. So that's fine. I just like to know where the objectivity is, So this is a conversation that has been going on for a while in the music industry, and the reason that one of the reasons that that I have been aware of it maybe a little bit longer than some of the others people specifically, even before I was aware of Suno, is because one of the things I do is I compose music and license music, and this has been a conversation in that world for a while because for pre-Suno and pre some of these things where they've gotten better and better with generating the voice, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but pre that, the idea of as this thing I just read a second ago, back in 2015, the idea of AI generating instrumental music for use, for licensing or for various use in video and things like that. It's been around for a while. And as the technology now has been sort of getting better over the past, say, 5 years, it's been really, really growing. People in the licensing industry, composers in particular, music producers, are now, they're really aware of it and starting to talk about it. So a lot of the groups that I travel in, so to speak, the videos that I watch and some of the things that I'm aware of, there's a lot of talk about this for producers, for musicians, for songwriters, for music composers, for people who write for music licensing, all these things. So that's one of the reasons why I've been following it so closely for a while, is because of that whole conversation, and then now with Suno being in the news so much and various things happening. The legality of it, I'm not going to try to get too much into today, because I'm going to keep this kind of short. But it's changing so rapidly. There's a recent development that just happened between Suno and Warner Brothers, which basically says we're going to work together. And the upside to that seems to be that maybe now Suno will be a little bit on a leash, where they won't just be randomly scraping the internet and take one of the big issues with what they've been doing is they've been just using anything and everything, including Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers music and Sony's music and all these other companies, the people that can afford to sue them, but also probably your music and everybody else's music. They've been using that music to train their AI. So they're basically without paying anybody, they've taken the music and they've taken your song and they've put it into AI and said, make something like this. And so that's a legal issue. And that's something that a lot of people are very angry about, and rightfully so, because their music has been stolen. So that's one issue. And so the idea of them now having this deal with starting with Warner Brothers and maybe others is the idea that now they're going to have access to all these catalogs under a more controlled environment, where maybe they won't just be randomly stealing as much as they have been in the past. Similar lawsuit happened not too long ago with ChatGPT, and they lost it. I mean, they were basically using copyrighted material such as books and things like that to generate their material, and so they then had to pay up for that. So at this point, I'm just sort of trying to give us context as to what's been going on a little bit in the industry for those that haven't been following. And when I laughed earlier and said, lots of people have not been following this, I'm just saying that a lot of my friends that are musicians aren't even really paying attention to this. And I don't mean this in a way like they should be following this. I mean, I'm just basically saying it's inconsequential to them at this point. A lot of my students that play instruments, they're not really keeping up much with this. The only people that are really paying attention to this are, I have a little bit of a stake in it because of what I said previously. I am interested in also in how this may affect future of education in terms of music education and things like that. And let me just also say that when I said earlier that we had all been using things like SoundHound and those and Shazam and those apps. Another thing that's happening with AI in terms of for all of us that use computers to help us record music is that AI tools have been increasingly integrated into our plugins and software for a while now. So one example I've seen of this pretty past year or two is some software called Ozone, which is a mastering software, and what it does, they have a specific AI model in there that listens to your music when you're mastering, listens to your music, and it will then either based on a couple of factors, either based on just what it's hearing and its training, it will then spit out what it thinks the genre is of your piece, but also a mastering suite of plugins with levels preset. So it masters your music. You can also put in something to compare it to. So you can say, I want it to kind of sound like this, and then it's supposed to take that and then make yours similar in terms of compression, equalization, all these kinds of things, levels and things like that. So that's just one example of many. Again, this AI idea. It's such a buzzword right now, but as I started with, it's been something that's been in technology since since the 50s apparently. So it's something that's increasingly being integrated into a lot of the plugins that I use and things that I see, there's various AI versions. You can turn them off, you can turn them on. A lot of times it's probably running in the background and you may not even be aware of it. So it is kind of everywhere. The the hype and the concern, I think, for a lot of people has been that there's a lot of talk about how AI in the world at large, how AI is going to replace jobs and things like that. And there's a lot of concern about that. And that's sort of beyond the scope of this video. There's plenty of videos out there about that, and I think nobody really knows. But one of the things that I am continuing to sort of like look at and talk about is how it's going to affect the music industry. And so, I asked I went back to a conversation I had with ChatGPT in July, and I took a little clip from that. Emotional intuition, and cultural context. Okay, so this is after a long conversation of like, is it going to replace musicians? Is it going to replace this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. ChatGPT says this is what it came up with based on its programming from other humans and, skimming the internet. Human composers draw on personal experience, cultural history, pain, joy, and nuance in ways that AI cannot. AI imitates patterns but doesn't understand why we write protest songs or lullabies. Authentic storytelling. A song like All I Need by Radiohead or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony express more than harmony. It conveys a worldview, a sense of urgency or yearning. AI can mimic aesthetics, but not the inner life that inspires them. 3. Innovation through rebellion. Humans don't just follow rules, we break them. And I don't know if that's a programming error or, I don't think it's anything too sinister, but it says we break them. AI models are trained on existing data, so they're often limited by the past. True originality often emerges from intentionally ignoring convention, not following it. I think that's a really good point I think that last one about that true originality often emerges from intentionally ignoring convention, whereas all AI can really do is sort of like warp what it already knows, basically, which I don't know if that's going to change in the future. And then the current and future role of AI in music, the likely future, it says, as an assistant is very likely and useful. And this is based on some previous things we had talked about. This is kind of a summation. So it's likely, very likely, it's going to be sort of an assistant. So, one of the things that I've used AI for is to, as far as an assistant goes, is to say, can you make me a contract? And this could be obviously done in a lot of different ways, a lot of different contexts you could say this about, but can you make me a contract that, says this, this, and this? And then of course you have to check it yourself because it's AI, it's not just because you had AI doesn't mean it's legally binding or that it's correct or anything like that. But it can get you a template pretty fast. So in the musical context, if you were to say like, can you give me a basic pop chord progression, in the key of C that's, blah, 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 blah. And then it can kind of spit out a sort of a framework or a template, and then you could maybe work from there. So when it talks about assistant, these are just a couple of things that pop in my head. Inspirational source, growing role. That's also what I was just saying. A complete substitute for humans, or a complete substitute for music. Unlikely because of, it says for artistry, and then as an industry tool, already happening. So if you go to Suno and you listen to some of the music there, some of it is pretty cool. Like some of it's, very, very impressive stuff. The thing that I've noticed about AI music is that after you've started to hear it for a while, it has a certain perfection to it and a certain sheen to it and I don't know what's going to be in 2 or 3 years, but they're really well done. So like what Suno's doing, it has a certain perfection to it and a certain sound to it that after it's what I call, I've in my notes here I put the party trick phenomenon. Like when you see a magician do something incredible, you're just like, wow. But if you find out what's going on behind the curtain, and you're like, oh, he just did this. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you're like, oh, well, it took him years to learn how to to do that sleight of hand. But the idea is that I feel like this is something I noticed a couple of years ago when I started listening to some of the completely AI generated music, was that when you first hear it, you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. But then as you continue to listen, let's say to that one song, or even go on to the next song by the same AI artist, the sheen starts to wear off, meaning it kind of starts to sound the same. And someone could boil this down to just variation and say, okay, well then they just need to program in more variation and that'll go away. And maybe, that's possible. But this is what I've noticed so far. It's just that when you initially, and I want to point these things out so that if you watch this video and you hear AI music and you're interested and you're kind of aware and you're sort of listening to what's going on, that I just want to point these things out to draw your attention to them. And that is that if you hear some amazing AI song, if possible, if you're interested in this, if that AI artist or whatever, the person that's, that this AI creation, if they've created, say, 2 or 3 or 4 songs from that same, those same prompts, then listen to the second and third song as well, because what you'll start to notice is it kind of all starts to sound the same, because there's a handful of like little tricks that they're pulling from. I heard something today that maybe I'll talk about in this video or maybe another video, but where it was an AI generated a commercial for an AI generated film, and I realized like immediately that the voiceover, the graphics, and the music were all AI generated, and I put on my headphones. I had to really listen. I was curious whether the voice was AI generated, because one of the things they're doing now is they're interjecting little imperfections into the voice to make it sound more real, to make it sound more human. Suno, you can famously hear this with the best thing that they do on Suno is they have the female voice, and there's a lot of airy, and just breaths and stuff like that. And it really sells the female voice, probably particularly to males. But you hear all these these breathy things, and they've made them all very, very breathy. And that's the thing that I think that Suno has done the best is the other thing they do is they'll do a lot of little, little runs like that, to make it sound more, because that's a human thing, So those are the things. They have really focused a lot on the voice in Suno. And earlier I was going through and checking out the latest model, version 5 of Suno, and just listening to some of the stuff being put out. And I was going to maybe play some of it today, and I don't know if I'll get to it because this video is going to be too long. But that brings me to, this brings me to my main point about this video, and that is that, and about AI music in general, is something I've been saying for a while, and it relates to the party trick phenomenon, and that is that the initial wow factor party trick is cool, but when you start to hear it repeatedly, it really wears off really, really quickly. Whereas oftentimes with a human artist, you realize like you go from one song to another, and like one song is a life story. It's a part of their life, and then you go to another song, and it's about this other thing that happened to that person, and you go to another song, and it's like an uplifting thing about this great thing that happened to him or whatever. The party trick part of it is that it's not a human that's doing any of it. They've trained it on human models, and then the software is spitting it out. My analogy for this is this I always think of parkour too, but like if you make if AI makes a cool like parkour video with people running around doing parkour, if you see it and you're like, well, that's just a computer just spit that out. That's not. But if you see a human doing parkour, you're like, man, wow, I wish I could do that. It's so cool. Like, how long did it take them to learn how to do that? So I was thinking today about this film that I saw at Sundance called Man on Wire. And it was was picked up at Sundance and later released. There was a documentary about this cat, this French cat in the 70s, and he got interested in. It's a great documentary. I think it's on Netflix. Last time I checked, if you want to watch it. And it was a reenactment documentary. You know what I mean? It just tells you the story, but in the 70s, this guy was interested in high wire, walking on wires, and got interested in it, kept practicing and doing it. And so where he landed at the end was he managed to, there's a whole story and drama behind how this all came about, as you can imagine. But he managed to get a walking wire from one World Trade Center building to another World Trade Center building and walked across. So unbelievable human feat, right? So this high wire idea, this unbelievable human feat. Here's a picture of him doing that. It's probably one of the few actual real pictures out there because of the time period and the nature of it. He had some people with him helping him. And so, and they took this is a photo taken in the 70s. So I asked AI to make me a picture of a man on a wire in 2025. And this is what it came up with. And so, as you can see, it's not bad. It's kind of cheesy, but it's not bad. There's flying cars and flying taxis. I like the little. I don't know why there's flying taxis in there, but apparently it's the future because I didn't ask for those. I just said, make me. This is Gemini. Make me a man, walking across two buildings or whatever, in 2025 So, but this image that we're looking at here, this generated image, I was going to say it's nothing. It's not nothing, but the reason that this is interesting is the story behind the story, the fact that he spent all this time developing this skill and worked his way up and worked, I think it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I think he was, practicing going between two trees, and then it got higher and higher, and, just getting better and developing his skills. It took a long time. He had to kind of dedicate his life to doing this to get to this point. And this is kind of how I feel about music. To get to the point, the reason that it's so interesting, or we get wowed when we read a great book, or when we see a film or painting that moves us, or hear a song that moves us, is because it's a tightrope act. When you go and you see a band on stage and they're all playing their instruments, I can tell you it is a tightrope act. I mean, they're well practiced, but when you're on stage and you're particularly when you're playing at the edge of your ability, or it's to get all these people in synchronization and play consistently every night. It just takes years and years of practice, and even then, it's a high tightrope act, basically. So, and that's what I think of. The reason that we're interested in music, and the reason that we're fascinated by music, and the reason that we're, when we go and see music live and we hear a song that we connect with, is because it's another human doing it. But if we just have a computer prompt, if we say, hey, can you make me a band that's playing on stage, and, make me a video with a band that's playing on stage, or a talking baby or whatever, I feel like the party trick of that is going to wear off. And I can also tell you that, as somebody who's keeping track of this, and, the generation now that's in their teens and 20s, they have zero interest in AI music. And the ones that I know, and I might have a biased opinion because a lot of them are musicians and things like that, but they are going to concerts and buying albums, and they are interested in music and interested in people. All this stuff I'm talking about, it's not even really. Now, if you're on TikTok or something like that, or the people that are that age that are on TikTok, they're acutely aware of when something is comes up AI visually, and I think music is going to go the same direction. Because they've seen it so many times, right? And AI visuals, even when they get better than they are now, it's still going to be apparent. But I think that AI music is going to be the same kind of thing. I think it's going to be an interesting tool, but I think at some point this whole thing that's happening right now is going to die down, and I think we're going to figure out how to integrate it into the industry. But this idea of it, and will it ever? This idea of it replacing is what I was going to say. Replacing humans. It's impossible to say. A lot of that's going to boil down to budget. But I think the current generations right now, I think are people that are in the industry and people that are the next generation of young people that are coming up. I think the answer is no. I think they're not interested in it. But there are also young people that are coming up that are going to school and studying computer technology so that they can go and program AI. So I don't mean to just present it as one-sided bias coming from the standpoint of a musician. There's both those. Let's see. I wanted to talk about one or two other things, and we're going to get out of here. I did want to point this out because to me, this is like, I don't know, it's just astounding. And this clip, if you've been following along with Suno and AI Music, you've seen this clip. You can skip over it if you want. It just makes me laugh. This whole interview, this is from an hour and a half interview here or so. And there's several other interesting points in there. One where he admits that they were taking from copyrighted material to train their, without paying anybody. Which is why Suno was sued. This is from 10 months ago, so this is pre-lawsuit. But let's just watch this.
It's not really enjoyable to make music now. People enjoy
Why did you say
Suno.
that?
It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. You need to get really good at an instrument or
That's
really
true.
good at a piece of production software. I think the majority of people don't enjoy the majority of the time they spend making
I think
music.
that's not
Do you
true.
not think that's like running? It is hard.
So he's saying that the part about saying that it takes a while to learn how to play an instrument and all that, and to get good at an instrument, and then it takes a while to learn how to get good at a DAW, a digital audio workstation. That is true. But then to extrapolate from that the majority of the people don't enjoy that time they're doing it. I mean, I guess you could say that about anything. The people that are programming his. First of all, I think learning to play an instrument I love it. So, and I have a lot of students that love it. It's frustrating at times, it's challenging at times, but I mean, anything worth doing is, so I was just thinking about like his programmers, are they, it's like, and of course AI may replace programmers at some point too, but this idea of saying like, well, I don't think programming's too hard, and nobody enjoys their time programming, so therefore you could say that about anything. Nobody enjoys their time driving a car, so we have auto drive. So it's interesting I think he probably said this as because he knows media well enough to know that that's a really good rage bait thing to say. It's going to get more clicks to that video. But it's interesting too, if you sort of extrapolate this and say, okay, well, if AI is going to replace all the things that are challenging for humans, I mean, I'm just saying like, programming, writing music, driving a car, those are three things I'm thinking about right now that AI is starting to do. Reading, right? We don't have to read much anymore because AI can answer it for us. All these things, where is that going to leave, if that were to actually happen? And if that's the vision of the AIs of these AI CEOs, Elon Musk and all these cats, it kind of makes you wonder, like, where does that leave humanity? And I know this is part of the concern, but it's just interesting to hear him actually say that. So I want to end with this and just say that, my man on wire analogy, the high wire act analogy, is this is something that musicians are doing when they're playing an instrument, when they're trying to play a song. They're tiptoeing across a high wire because it is challenging, it is difficult. And when you're trying to learn how to walk across a high wire, so to speak, or learn how to play an instrument, there's lots of falls and lots of mistakes and lots of frustrations. But I think we know as humans that this is what makes us grow and what makes us human. Otherwise we're just sitting around with a feeding tube and staring at a screen 24/7, which I hope is not our future. But I know in some sci-fi movies that's what we see, right? We see just blobs of people being feeding tubes watching a screen or something. I just wanted to end by the sort of, just to give you one more thing to think about with this, this kind of sports analogy of saying, one of the reasons that people like to watch sports, if you're into basketball or you're into baseball or you're into football, these kinds of things, is that because a person has spent their whole life training for this moment, and all of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that person being able to do that, it's taken years of hours per day training. And it's the same thing in music. I can tell you, people that we know that are virtuosos on the instrument, they have dedicated their lives to playing that instrument. And this is and they love the instrument in the same way that I hope that a basketball player, I don't really follow sports too much, but a basketball player loves the game. The hours per day that you have to spend, the training you have to go through, and the length of time, and you have to have some luck too. Despite the genetic factors, you have to have some luck to, even if there's lots of talented people that probably never make it in the NBA as an example. But I can say this about music for sure, and I think this is probably true with sports too. A lot of people play sports because they enjoy it. But with music, I can tell you for 100% certain that a big part of why we do it is because we enjoy doing it. It's something, when you learn a song, or when you write a song, or when you play a song, or whatever, you've accomplished something that was difficult. And in this interview that I just watched, that I just played a second ago, he asks him, well, what about running? There are people that running is difficult, but there are people that do it and love it. And his response is, well, I think that's only a few people. Most people stop running because they don't like it. So you could say that about anything. Most people stop playing baseball as they did when they were a kid because it was hard and because they had to get a job, or most people stop doing this, or most people stop doing that. But then as adults, sometimes we find those things again, right? We go back to the musical instrument, we go back to running, we go back to this, we go back to that, because we realize it's something that we enjoy, something that we love. And so I think that ultimately that is why most people play music, create music, write songs, is because it's something that drives them, it's something that they enjoy, it's something that they love. And this is a very much in the same way that if I said, hey, AI, make me a basketball game with lots of people, and in this one they can jump 12 feet in the air, none of us would be impressed by that because it's just a computer generated thing. But when we go see an actual basketball game and we see these people that have trained their bodies to the peak performance, or you go to the Olympics, or any of these things, the reason we're all at the edge of our seats is because we're pushing the boundaries of what humans can do. Not everyone takes the time and the discipline and the dedication. Not everyone takes that time to learn how to play the guitar, or to learn how to sing, or to learn how to play the piano, or whatever. And so we're impressed when people do that. So I think this is the big, what I call the apple and the grape, or the apple and the banana. This is the big difference between what we're talking about with AI. It's hard to know where the future is going, but it's a very, very different thing. people that have used basically the search engine to search all of the music and then spit out more music is a very different thing from someone that has actually learned how to play an instrument or learned how to write music or something like that. So it's just want to just try to put AI as it is in music a little bit in perspective. There's enough about this subject that this could potentially be a series. So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. This might just be a one-off, but I really wanted to just talk about it a little bit because it's a subject that has been very concerning to a lot of people in music. And then also I've noticed a subject that some people that just play music know nothing about. They're not paying any attention to it other than maybe having heard some cool cover that an AI did of some, that's the thing that's floating around right now. I'm sure you've got one in your email. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you like it, hit the subscribe button and I'll talk to you soon.